Close your eyes and imagine. You've just found a home you absolutely love. It checks all the boxes, it's in your budget, and it's super cute too. Now open your eyes and let's talk about making an offer. This is where things start getting real. Up to now, we've talked about how to choose your realtor and get pre-approved, how much money you need to buy a home, and how to set up your home search, and how to tour homes. Now it's time to talk about writing an offer that gives you the best chance of getting the home without doing something reckless or overpaying because emotions are high. Welcome back. So far in this series, I've walked you through the early steps of the home buying process and how to avoid some of the biggest mistakes buyers make before they ever write an offer. Now we're at the next major step, making a competitive offer. Hi, I'm Brandon King, Realtor in Oregon and Washington. In this video, I'm going to discuss how to choose an offer price, how I gather the information needed to negotiate strong terms, what matters besides price, how contingencies protect you, how earnest money and escalation clauses work, and what happens if the seller counters. The first thing most buyers focus on is price. And absolutely that matters, but we don't just pull a number out of thin air. Before I recommend an offer price, I'll put together a comparative market analysis, or CMA. That means I'm looking at recent similar sales in the area, current active listings that might be competing, homes that recently went pending, and sometimes even homes that failed to sell and have been taken off the market. I'll also research how quickly homes at that price point are selling in the neighborhood. And I want to know how long that specific home has been on the market. If it's been sitting for a while, we want to know how long it's been listed at the current price. A home that's just hit the market yesterday is a very different situation from a home that's had little activity after multiple price reductions. And here's another important thing to understand. The asking price is not always the real value of the home or the final sale price the seller is expecting. Sometimes the asking price is aspirational, but unrealistic, and the seller knows it. Sometimes a home is intentionally priced low to create urgency, attract more buyers, and generate multiple offers that first weekend. Other times, it may simply be priced wrong, either too high or too low. But either way, if we notice that a home looks like a great deal, other buyers are probably going to notice that too. So if it's the first weekend on the market and the home is clearly underpriced, a strong offer may need to be above the asking price. That doesn't automatically mean you're overpaying. It may simply mean the asking price was never the true market value in the first place. One thing buyers sometimes ask is whether they should just throw out a really low offer and see what happens. Sometimes there's room to negotiate, but there's a big difference between making a smart, below market offer and making one that is so low that the seller feels insulted or thinks you're just wasting their time. When that happens, some sellers won't even counter. They'll just ignore it and move on. And if you still want the home, now you're left negotiating with yourself, trying to decide how much to come up just to get back into the conversation. A well-supported offer can absolutely be below the asking price. It just needs market data to back it up. One of the most valuable things I can do for you before writing an offer is to call the listing agent. This seems obvious, but I can't tell you how many times a buyer's agent has sent an offer on one of my listings without ever picking up the phone. We want to know whether there is already an offer, if the seller has set a review deadline, and if there are terms that matter to the seller beyond price. For example, maybe they need some time to stay in the home after closing, so they have time to pack and move. Maybe they want a fast closing because they already bought another home. Maybe they need extra time to review offers because they're traveling. They may care more about certainty than squeezing every dollar out of the deal. Sometimes the strongest offer is not the highest price. It's the offer that solves the seller's problem, whatever that may be. Timing matters more than buyers often realize. If a home is new on the market, priced well, and likely to get attention, you may want to make your offer quickly. That might mean trying to get your offer accepted before the weekend and before the first open house. That's when most buyers will have an opportunity to see the home and make competing offers, and usually when the seller realizes they have a hot commodity. This is when we might use what's called a bully offer. A bully offer is usually a strong offer submitted early, often with a short expiration deadline. It's intended to pressure the seller to make a decision before they collect more offers. Sometimes this works really well, and the seller is thrilled to avoid the uncertainty or the stress of a busy weekend. Other times it backfires because the seller feels pressured and decides to wait. On the other hand, if the home has been sitting on the market for a while, we may not need to rush in the same way. Just because the home has been on the market for a few weeks doesn't mean there has been no interest. The seller may be about to accept someone else's offer. A buyer could show up at any time, and for some reason, they often do just about the time you find the home you love. So deciding when to make an offer is always part timing, part psychology, and part reading the situation. Every offer has an expiration deadline, the point in time when the seller must sign and return the offer before it expires. A short deadline can create urgency and keep the seller from sitting on your offer while they wait for more buyers. This is part of what can make a bully offer effective. But if the deadline is too short, especially if the seller is hard to reach or wants time to think, it can annoy them and work against you. So the deadline should fit the situation. A fresh hot listing may justify a shorter deadline. A tenant-occupied property, an out-of-town seller, or a seller who needs time to talk through the terms may just need more time. Some sellers still want to sign paperwork with their agent in person. This is one of those details that seem small but can influence how the seller feels about the offer. An offer is not just a number, it's a package of contract terms. Price matters, but so does the closing date, possession date, any occupancy after closing, earnest money, financing type, down payment, contingencies, and what personal property is included or excluded. Let's talk about the closing date for a second. A standard closing date is usually about 30 days from the date the offer is accepted. Cash sales can actually close in as little as a week. Finance sales can sometimes close in about 21 days if everything goes smoothly, but 30 days is pretty normal and tends to feel less rushed for everyone involved. Some deals are more complicated and might take 5 or 6 weeks. In a few situations, that may work well for the seller, but generally the longer the closing timeline, the more risk there is that something changes before closing. Most sellers, if possible, would rather keep the process closer to 30 days. Loan type and down payment can also affect how the seller feels about the offer. The seller gets paid the same no matter what loan type you use or how much you put down, if the deal closes. And there really isn't one loan type that is automatically more likely to close than another, but there is often a perception of risk with lower down payment offers and FHA loans. That perception is usually less about the loan itself and more about what could happen in the buyer's life before closing. For example, a conventional loan with 20% down and an FHA loan with 3.5% down may not really matter to the seller if both deals close. But if someone is only in a position to put down 3.5% and their car breaks down before closing and needs a new transmission, there goes the down payment. So sometimes sellers feel more comfortable when the buyer appears to have a little more financial cushion. Buyers are often surprised by how many parts of the contract can be adjusted. Remember, everything is negotiable, and sometimes a clean, simple offer with good terms feels stronger to a seller than a slightly higher price with complicated terms. The goal is always to make the offer attractive without exposing you to unnecessary risk. Contingencies are some of the most important parts of an offer because they protect you if something important doesn't go as planned. The one most people think of first is the inspection contingency. This gives you the time to inspect the property, evaluate the condition, ask for repairs or other concessions, and potentially walk away if you and the seller can't agree on a resolution or if something really major comes up. From the seller's point of view, a longer inspection period means more risk and uncertainty because the home is off the market while you're deciding. There's a balance between taking the time you need to do your due diligence and keeping this contingency short enough to keep the offer attractive. There's also the financing contingency. Even with a strong pre-approval, the loan still needs to make its way through underwriting. Employment, income, assets, and credit need to be scrutinized, and the property itself still needs to qualify. Then there's the appraisal contingency. This protects you if the home does not appraise for the agreed upon purchase price. That becomes especially important when we are offering over the asking price or using an escalation clause. Another way buyers often strengthen an offer is by agreeing to cover an appraisal gap up to a certain amount. For example, if you offer $600,000 and the home appraises at $585,000, and your offer states you would cover an appraisal gap up to $15,000, the sale would still move forward. The price of the home doesn't change, but you might have to come up with more down payment to cover the difference. That can make your offer much more attractive to a seller because it reduces the risk of the deal falling apart over the appraisal. Of course, this only makes sense if you actually have the extra cash available and feel comfortable using it. It's a strong tool, but like everything else, it should be used thoughtfully. There's also the title contingency. This gives you the opportunity to review the title report and make sure there are no unexpected liens, easements, ownership disputes, or other problems affecting clear transfer of the title. And then there's the seller property disclosure statement, in which the seller discloses known problems with the home. Once you receive the seller property disclosures, you typically have a short window to review them and decide whether anything in them changes your willingness to move forward. This is called the right of revocation. In competitive situations, some buyers shorten contingencies, waive contingencies, or even do inspections before the offer deadline. Those moves can absolutely make an offer stronger, but they can also increase your risk. So before doing anything like that, I want you to fully understand the trade-offs. With some of the offer terms, we can actually take advantage of nuance and make an offer sound stronger without giving away your protections. For example, we might include language saying, buyer will not ask the seller to repair any individual item under a certain dollar amount. That shows the seller you're not planning to nickel and dime them after the inspection and ask for every loose doorknob, dripping faucet, or tiny cosmetic issue to be fixed. It signals that you're going to be reasonable. You could also state in your offer, buyer to ask for no repairs. That sounds great, but it's important to understand what it actually means. It simply means the buyer is not planning to ask the seller to actually hire a contractor and make repairs before closing. It does not mean the buyer won't ask for a price reduction, closing costs, or some other concession if the inspection uncovers something that needs repair. That nuance sometimes gets missed, especially by newer agents or sellers who haven't been through this before. And in the real world, if the inspection reveals an issue and the buyer has the right to walk away from the deal, the seller may decide they would rather renegotiate something than have you back out of a deal and have to go back on the market. That does not mean that they will agree to everything you ask for. Just understand that statements like buyer to ask for no repairs are not the same as waiving inspection contingencies. While they may sound really strong to a seller, they often do not carry as much weight in practice as people think. Earnest money is the deposit you place in escrow to show the seller you're serious. It's applied towards your down payment at closing or the purchase price if you're paying cash. In many cases, an earnest money deposit of around 1% of the purchase price is sufficient, but that can vary depending on the situation. As long as your contingencies are still protecting you, the earnest money is usually not actually at risk. But once those contingencies have been met or expire, if you back out of the deal, that money may be on the line. From the seller's point of view, a larger earnest money deposit can make the offer feel stronger because it signals confidence and commitment. In some situations, increasing the earnest money can sweeten the offer without adding much real risk to you, assuming your contingencies are still in place and protecting you. Another situation that sometimes comes into play is a contingent sale. This means you're making an offer on the new home contingent on your current home selling first. The challenge is that the seller usually sees this as a lot of additional risk. The purchase is now dependent on another transaction happening first, and that creates a great big opportunity for the deal to fall apart. That doesn't mean contingent offers never work. They absolutely can, especially if your current home is already on the market, already under contract, or priced in a way that gives the seller confidence it will sell quickly. Basically, the closer your home is to sold, the stronger your offer will be. And if your home isn't even on the market yet, that's a much weaker offer and usually a much harder offer to get accepted. In competitive situations, some sellers simply won't consider a contingent offer. And even if they do, you're probably giving up a lot of your leverage. But if the home you're making an offer on has been on the market for a bit, it can absolutely work. Escalation clauses come up a lot in competitive offer situations. An escalation clause basically says, I'm offering this amount, but if someone else offers more, I'm willing to beat that by a certain increment up to a maximum cap. For example, you might offer $600,000 with an escalation clause up to $630,000 in increments of $5,000 over a competing offer. This can be a useful tool because it allows you to stay competitive without automatically offering your highest number up front. That said, not every listing agent or seller likes escalation clauses. Some agents and sellers don't fully understand how they work, and some listing agents discourage them because they would rather have everyone just submit the highest and best offer up front. But remember, they still must present every offer to the seller, even if it's not structured the way they would prefer. So while escalation clauses can be effective, they're not always the right move. They are simply one of the tools in the toolbox. In multiple offer situations, a lot of buyers assume the winner is simply the person who pays the most. That's not always true. Price matters, but sellers are also choosing the offer they believe is most likely to close smoothly. A clean offer with a strong local lender, reasonable contingencies, solid earnest money, and terms that fit the seller's needs can absolutely beat a slightly higher offer that feels messy or risky. The goal is not just to win. The goal is to win without doing something reckless. Once your offer is submitted, the seller has three basic choices. They can accept it, they can reject it, or they can counter it. A seller counter offer might change the price, the earnest money, the closing date, possession date, contingencies, or any number of other terms. You can then accept their counter, reject it, or counter back. This can go back and forth more than once and continues until both sides come to an agreement that they're willing to sign. Just understand that once you send a counteroffer, you can't simply change your mind and decide to accept it instead. And while you're going back and forth, another buyer can still come in with a cleaner, stronger offer. Only once the buyer and seller have both signed the same version of the contract and it is sent back properly is the home officially under contract. Once the offer is accepted, things start moving pretty fast. In this next video, I'll walk you through the whirlwind that happens the first few days of the due diligence period, including depositing earnest money, reviewing the seller property disclosure, scheduling inspections, and understanding the title report. That's why the next video in this series is so important. If you're getting ready to buy a home in Oregon or Washington, and you see the value in having a strong negotiator in your corner, you can schedule a home buying consultation at the link in the description below. And if this series has been helpful so far, check out my other videos and subscribe. You don't want to miss the next step in the home buying process.